It's JD of Bvtvnews, and I'm back to give y'all the latest and greatest news in the sport of boxing, man. With that being said, man, let's talk a little bit about, I call him Mr. Spice Man, Mr. Chris Eubank Jr.
Let me add a little bit of spice to that.
Wow. All right. Now, with Chris Eubank Jr., he put a little bit of a picture out there on Instagram, and it started to swirl a lot of different rumors, in the sport of boxing, and one of the things that, it seemed like he was trying to insinuate was that a Bud versus Chris Eubank Jr., kind of fight was on the way. Now, I'm going to keep it real, man. In the words of Senior, man, let's put a little spice on this, right? Now, I believe that, there's been no confirmation. First off, there's been no confirmation from Terence Bud Crawford or his camp at all. Now, I believe that this is just a feeler out there and a campaign on the Chris Eubank Jr. side, that he could be a viable option if Terence Bud Crawford doesn't get Keith Thurman or, Tim Tszyu. Now, you remember with Chris Eubank Jr., he had a heck of a 2023. It first saw him losing to Liam Smith early last year.
And Liam Smith, he's on the brink. 2 minutes remaining. And down goes Eubank again. And the tail, I think, is about to come in.
Then, Chris Eubank Jr. was able to, kind of shift a few things around, go get with Terence Bud Crawford's trainer, Brian Bomac McIntyre. Because remember, he originally was with Roy Jones Jr., but then he ended up getting with Bomac for the rematch against Liam Smith, and he was able to, in September of last year, go get his get back against Liam Smith.
Right hand from Eubank says lots of blood showing now on Smith's right eye. Eubank chopping down with the right. Smith trying to stay out of the way and stopped it.
So now, you got Chris Eubank Jr. looking for another bout, and then you also have Terence Bud Crawford, who, since the Errol Spence Jr. bout fell apart, he's also looking for another dance partner as he, tries to wrap up his career. So I personally think that right now it's a very smart tactic, by Chris Eubank Jr. to throw that out there. I don't think anything is confirmed. I believe that with Terence Bud Crawford, you are going to sit back and have to wait until we get the results of Tim Tszyu versus Keith Thurman. I think at the end of the day, I think he kind of sort of would like to face off against Tim Tszyu or Thurman, depending on who wins and if they can both get out of that fight uninjured. So hopefully the winner of that bout doesn't suffer some kind of massive injury that's going to put them on ice for a long time. But Chris Eubank Jr. putting that out there also does give a viable other option for Bud, and it allows him to also take that into consideration if Al Heyman in the PBC can't come to him with the right contract for Thurman or Tim Tszyu, whoever wins that bout, right? And the reason why that's, critically important is because, a lot of people keep making a lot of waves of how, Terence Bud Crawford should face Jaron Ennis. He's robbing the sport. He's robbing the sport. And I'm going to keep it real with y'all, man. I'm going to keep it really honest with y'all. If you're fair and objective, what we're seeing going on with Bud and Boots has happened all throughout boxing. And I'm going to be real honest with you. What makes the Bud versus Boots situation very unique, in my opinion, is if we all are fair for a minute, let's be fair. Let's be honest and objective, and let's put ourselves in Terence Crawford's shoes, right? If you're Terence Crawford, you would not face Jaron Ennis either. You would go for a Eubank, you would go for a Tszyu, or you go for a Thurman. And here's why. For years, we all knew that Al Heyman in the PBC froze out Terence Bud Crawford, right? How long ago should we have gotten Terence Bud Crawford versus Keith Thurman? How long ago should we have gotten Terence Bud Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr.? How long ago should we have gotten Terence Crawford versus Danny Garcia, two fighters who actually fought each other in the amateurs? How long ago should we have gotten Terence Crawford versus Sean Porter? Now, I got to give credit to Shawn Porter, and I got to give credit to Errol Spence Jr. Shawn Porter was his own man, and he went over there and he fought Terence Bud Crawford, right? He was the first one to wave his hand and go face Bud. And then you got to give credit to Errol Spence Jr., even though it was a few years too late. You got to give credit to Errol Spence Jr. for actually doing the fight with Bud as well. Because I know y'all remember that moment when they were at the weigh-in and we heard Errol Spence Jr. tell Bud, man, you should thank me for making this fight. And as a fan, I got to admit, I do appreciate Errol Spence Jr. for making that fight, because if Errol doesn't make it, I believe that we never get that fight, and we still will be sitting here talking about the mystery of Bud versus Spence. I believe firmly there are people, in the circle of Errol Spence Jr. that potentially did not want that fight to go down at that time, and definitely didn't want it to go down at 147. I believe he definitely had people in his ear saying, don't do it, let's wait, let's stall out a little longer. But Errol Spence Jr. was a man of his word and stepped into the ring. So you got to give him credit for that. But when you look at how PBC froze him out of all these bouts that he should have had years ago, right? Now you got Jaron Ennis on the come up, who's not really a star in the sport, but he is ascending. He is soon to be a star in the sport. He will be king one day. If you're Terence Bud Crawford, why would you do the PBC any favors, right? Why would you do the PBC any favors to boost the profile of a young bull who, for a company that pretty much didn't give you any business for years, right? Because at this point, if you were to face Jaron Ennis, it does nothing but boost Ennis's profile off of your name, right? If Boots beats you, suddenly he's now beat the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the sport, which boosts his profile. Even if Boots Ennis does well in a controversial loss, you still boost the profile of a Jaron Ennis if that ends up happening as well. So the reality is, man, for all those out there clamoring for that fight and saying that, Bud is tripping, if you're really being honest, man, you would not face Boots either. And let's not act like in the sport of boxing, we haven't seen this happen before, right? We saw this happen with Floyd Mayweather and Errol Spence Jr., right? Floyd Mayweather, if he really wanted to boost the profile of Errol Spence Jr., could have easily fought Errol Spence Jr. on his way out. Not an Andre Berto, not some of the other fighters that he faced off against. But Floyd Mayweather's like, nah, young bull, you got to go make your name on your own, player. I'm not going to sit here and face you and give you a profile as I'm a fading star and I'm on the way out. We saw the same thing happen with Manny Pacquiao and Terence Crawford, right? A lot of people forget that Crawford and Pacquiao were both with Top Rank at a particular point, as Manny was on the way out, right? And Manny sat there and said, nah, man, I'm not going to allow Terence Bud Crawford to get in the ring with me and boost his profile for Bob Arum and for Terence Crawford, right? And so Manny Pacquiao did the exact same thing to Terence Bud Crawford, which is kind of a common sense thing that you would see happen in the sport. If I got 8, 9, 10 years over you, and, I've already been in this sport that much longer than you, I would have to really be cool with you, cool with your team, cool with all of your handlers on my way out to face you and boost your profile instead of making you go the route that I had to go. And so I really think at the end of the day, man, we need to throw that whole Boots Ennis versus Bud scenario out the window. For all y'all out there, if you're keeping it honest with yourself, you wouldn't face Boots either if you were Terence Bud Crawford, and you look at all the facts of what's happened for years with Bud in the PBC. So that puts Bud in a position where he is going to look at possibly a Chris Eubank Jr., right? But he probably definitely would like to face off against a Tszyu or a Thurman. And the reason why Tszyu or Thurman are viable opponents is because with Tim Tszyu, Tszyu has a whole country of Australia backing him. And Tim Tszyu has already been on the record as being a throwback fighter, saying that he absolutely would see it as an honor to be in the ring with Terence Bud Crawford. And with Keith Thurman at this point, Keith Thurman is truly, in my opinion, I think he's really ready to make the Bud fight. Was he ready to do that probably years ago? I don't think Keith was, but I do think at this point, Keith Thurman is really ready to make a Bud versus Thurman bout if he were to be successful against Tszyu and defeat him. So at that point, that leaves Terence Bud Crawford with 2 PBC options, but Chris Eubank comes in, interestingly, as a non-PBC option because let's face it, the UK crowd is one of the best crowds in boxing, right? I feel like the UK fan base as well as the Mexican fan base are some of the most loyal fan bases in the sport. And you can always make a fight that's going to sell well with, someone from the UK or someone from Mexico, right? And so when you look at that Chris Eubank element, that would make for a massive bout that would do mega dollars with Terence Bud Crawford going across the pond, right, to face off in the UK, going up to 160, right? And so that would do massive dollars. So I really think that is a very good, smart strategy from Chris Eubank Jr. and Bud, because I'm pretty sure they had a conversation. Because, again, y'all got to remember that Brian Bomac McIntyre was literally just the trainer of Chris Eubank Jr. for the Liam Smith rematch. So remember, there is a connection. So you know that they have talked, right? So I think that's a very, very smart strategy for Chris Eubank to put that out there and give Bud that other option on the table so that when Thurman and Tszyu are complete later this month, he also has a non-PBC negotiating tactic to go to the table with Al Heyman, in PBC. But nevertheless, man, we're going to see, what ends up happening, with Terence Bud Crawford and who he chooses. I personally feel like he really wants Tszyu. I think he expects Tszyu to beat Thurman. And I really think he loved a showdown to get that 154-pound strap up off of Tszyu, which is why I think, that probably is what, he would look for the most. But I think he'd be open to a Thurman bout. And he also would be open to a Chris Eubank Jr. bout. But, you really got to look at how good of a fight it would be with a Tim Tszyu, with Australia behind him and with a 154-pound strap. I think that does some really, really good numbers in the sport, as well as, that Chris Eubank Jr. card would as well. But y'all let me know what y'all think in the comment section, man, about who Terence Bud Crawford is going to face off against next, man. Is he going to face off against Eubank Jr.? Would it be Tszyu? Would it be Thurman? It looks like it points to one of those 3 fighters. Let me know what you think in the comments, man. This is JD of Bvtvnews. I'm going to keep giving y'all the latest and greatest news in the sport of boxing, man. Till next time, man. Deuces.